My talk title today is Living on Purpose. And as we sit with purpose, the question I want to ask is, when you think of a purpose or purpose, what comes to mind? Is it an activity? Is it a role you play? Or is it a beingness? Is it actually understanding that the truth of who and what we are is this place that has so much love that it can illuminate the entire world? And for some people, that might sound like a lot, and it might even sound grandiose. For some, it might be like, oh my gosh, who is this person to say within me there is enough love for all the world? What I want to ask is, looking at the conditions of planet Earth right now, looking at what's happening throughout the world right now, what might happen if each of us understood instantaneously the truth that our absolute true purpose is to be this love in the world? Perhaps we wouldn't even have to have a process of bringing peace on planet Earth. Perhaps we would say peace is who and what we are. And in Unity and New Thought teachings, we say, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. And perhaps it's the only place we can ever actually focus on that's going to make any difference in the world, and that is to be peace. Now, we've heard this for some of us for decades. What does it actually mean to live on purpose? To understand that each of us, as Michael Beckwith said in that reading, there's a blueprint within each and every one of us, and that blueprint is fundamentally the same for each of us. That is love, that is source, that is light, that is joy, the different words we use for it. But we each have a unique strand of DNA that allows for us to have a unique expression of bringing that into the world. Sometimes it's so simple that if your mind is anything like mine, your mind might want to complicate it and say, it can't be that simple. Can it be that simple? That at the core of each and every living being is the fundamental idea of God, of source, of love, of light. That's who and what we are. And we came into this world as an emanation, an expression, a particle of that. And we came in with our unique strand of DNA that we might call the ego, which, by the way, sometimes gets a really bad rap. I was just reading a thread. Sometimes I like to read the comments on social media just to see where we're at in human consciousness. And Byron Katie posted a question, and people were commenting about the ego. The ego is bad. We must get rid of it. We must fight the ego. We must destroy the ego. What if, rather than having that point of view, we could say the ego, the personality self, at our most awakened level of awareness, actually becomes the instrument that we use to play the beautiful music of love? And in some cases, Margot and other people, that might show up as actually music. And for others, it might be speaking. And for others, it might be sitting with someone and being really present and actually hearing the person in front of us. For another, it might be helping someone who is struggling with some addiction or with homelessness or an experience of not being housed. We can be the difference. We each have our own unique gifts and ways we bring it into the world. So in that way, it's not at all about getting rid of, it's about harnessing. And maybe that's not the right word. Maybe it's embodying, making peace with, integrating those parts of ourselves that once we might have called spiritual and human. And as we talked about the last time I was here, we're waking up to a new level of consciousness where we understand that we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. That means that my personality is my unique strand of DNA that allows me to bring spirit into the world in my own unique voice. The example I often use, if you think about Tony Robbins, I'm sure we all know who Tony Robbins is, and think about his energy for a minute. If you've ever been in his presence or if you've ever seen him on TV, I mean, the man has energy, right? He's on that stage and there's thousands of people and the music is pumping and he's getting the crowd going. That's his unique expression of how he brings spirit into the world. Now think of Mother Teresa for a moment. Can you imagine asking her to get up on that stage and play Tony Robbins? That's not her unique strand. She came in with a different idea or an ideation of love. And so what if our true purpose is actually to simply recognize, and understand that our unique gifts and talents that we've been given have been given to us so that we can bring more love into the world, more joy into the world, and that each of us, regardless of what that expression looks like and feels like, it's the perfect expression. Another way to say it is, let's stop trying to pretend like we're someone else, or try to emulate someone, or try to pretend to be someone. They do say that, it's the highest form of flattery is for someone to imitate us. But at some point, we realize that the authentic expression of our purpose is really finding in the stillness who we've come here to be. Not what we've come here to do, but how we can bring our own unique way of delivering spirit into the world. There's a couple of things that I've been aware of in the last few days that I wanted to speak about. One is in my book, in my first book, Conscious Being, I talk about the power of words, which all of us who are Unity and New Thought students, we understand that words have power. And so I've dedicated myself to eliminating certain words from my vocabulary, and I added one this week. And I wasn't aware of how strong this word is in the world until this week when I was watching TV and I kept hearing it over and over and over again, and the word is fight. She lost her battle with cancer. We're fighting for our rights. We're going to keep fighting and push through this. And when we talk about the power of words, I want to be really clear, because two of the words that I've eliminated from my vocabulary to the best of my ability, and I remind myself if I hear myself saying it, oh yeah, bad and good, right and wrong. So I'm not saying it's wrong to be in the paradigm of fighting. I'm asking, what does it get created when we're swimming in the consciousness of a fight? And many of us have been programmed in this way that we're not even aware, like a fish could never describe water. We hear that. We can't even necessarily, until we become aware, we might not even be aware of the programming that we have received from what in New Thought teachings we call race consciousness, which doesn't have anything to do with race. We're talking about the human race. The stories that get passed down. And one of the stories that I hear, and it's so pronounced right now, is that we must fight. We talk about fighting for freedom. We talk about fighting for rights. We talk about fighting and battling diseases. And the world is, one more time, there's a war happening in the world, which most of the time on planet Earth, looking back, we have had some kind of war happening on planet Earth. And I'm really aware in the last few weeks that there is a pull to take sides, and that it's very seductive to take sides. And what I've been aware of as I'm in the silence and asking myself, who have I come here to be in the midst of this? Because that's really, I think, one of the most powerful questions I can ask, and I can invite anyone to ask in that, and that is, who have I come here to be in the midst of this? Because it's very seductive to take a side. And the only side I want to take is the side for peace, the side for love. And the human mind wants to sort and separate and categorize. This group is bad, this group is wrong, this group is right. I am of this religion, so I must believe this. And as Eckhart Tolle so beautifully said in his book, A New Earth, we are moving into an era where we're moving beyond concepts and ideologies. Now let's really be with that. We're moving into an era or a paradigm that is beyond concepts and ideologies. That might be a lot for, if your mind is like mine, that might be a lot to grasp. You mean I'm not supposed to have an idea? That's an ideology. I'm not supposed to have a point of view. I'm not supposed to have an opinion. We talked about this the last time, I believe. And it's not so much that I'm not supposed to have one. It's recognizing what gets created when I believe that's who I am. I grew up with this religion, therefore I must be on this side. I live in this area of the world, therefore I must be on this side. This group of people treats this group of this way, so I must be against them. And I understand the pull. I want to have as much love and compassion for myself for the pull of wanting to take a side, and not going to the wrongness of that, but just ask myself very simply, as I feel myself taking a side here, what energy how am I contributing to peace? Or am I contributing to the war on planet Earth? Because the war doesn't only happen in the Middle East right now. The war happens right here within each and every one of us. It might happen between friends and family when we take a side. And I'm using that as only one example of how we might have the impulse, the seductive impulse to believe that I am my thoughts, I am my opinions, I am my point of view. And there's something that feels really safe about that. That's why we say we want to find a community of like-minded people. Let me find people who agree with me, because then I'll feel safe. And I think now the younger generation talks about creating a safe space, and they often talk about that from the outside in. A safe space is, please don't ever disagree with me so that I don't feel triggered. And I'm laughing, and I don't mean to be laughing, but the reason I'm laughing is, oh my gosh, that was me in my 20s. That was me. It was 100%. The world is broken and I need to fix it. And these people need to stop doing this. And I'm going to do anything I can to fight against what they're doing. In other words, I'm going to go to war at war. I'm going to be at war with people who disagree with me. Another way to say it is at every moment we have a choice to contribute to the war and violence in the world or the peace of the world. And what I'm not saying is that we do a spiritual bypass and say, oh, nothing, there's no war happening. There's no difficulty in the world. Everything is love and light. Instead, what I'm inviting us to do is to ask ourselves, can I be free of the reactive impulse that lives within me? And the reactive impulse is to think that I must find people who agree with me in order to be safe. We create religions, we create political parties, we create countries, we create states, we have NorCal and SoCal. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, right? My team. I haven't told this story in a while, but I was in San Francisco and I was on Union Street, and there was an athletic parade of some kind. And if you know me, you know I probably don't know much about it. So let's say it was baseball. I think that might be true. And there were these floats coming down Union Street, and there was a little kid. He was probably, I'm going to guess he was 3. He might have been 4, and he was holding his dad's hand. And a float came up, and the boy started jumping up and down and getting excited. And the dad looked at him, and I'll never forget the energy. And he said, do not cheer for that float. That is not our team. Our team is the next float. And in that moment, so many messages were delivered to that child. Now, he might not have received them the way that I would have. That might not have been a pivotal moment in this 4-year-old's life. But for me, it was, because I was really aware of how we're so deeply entrenched in the consciousness of competition, the consciousness of othering, the consciousness of us and them. And if it's true, what Unity's foundational principle tells us, that there's only one power and one presence, then I can invite myself to ask, do I do that when it's convenient? I remember, I might have said it here, but I was speaking at a Unity, and I didn't realize I was going to say this, but I said, it occurs to me that Unity and New Thought principles are inconvenient. Because the convenient way is to not change. The convenient way is to say, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Let's just agree to disagree, right? Instead, what our principles are inviting us to do is to ask ourselves the fundamental question, do I now believe, and can I now embody a greater reality? And that reality is at the core of every living being is the fundamental spark of divinity. That's the truth of me. Therefore, it must be the truth of the other person I'm looking at. So it's not possible in the realm of spirit that they're an other. Now, if this is bringing anything up that might feel a little conflictual for you, I want to say congratulations, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And I've noticed, this is true for me, it might not be true for you, but if I just surround myself with people who agree with me, I lived in San Francisco for 30 years, pretty much people agree, at least politically. There's a kind of an agreement that we're all going to be this certain sort of political point of view. But when I stay in that and I don't invite myself to look at other people's point of view, then I stay small. And so what is our unique expression of purpose? What is your unique expression of purpose? I love what the reading from Michael Beckwith said. He says it's always been there, right? Deep within every one of us is already the fundamental knowing of who and what we are. And yet in some way, we need to cultivate an awareness of that. In other words, we don't grow spiritually. We grow in awareness of the truth of who and what we are. And the more I know that for me, the more I know that for you. In other words, in my 20s, when I believed the world was broken, I came to understand that it's only because I believed I was broken. And because I believed I was broken, it's literally all I could see. It doesn't mean, and this is important, I think, it doesn't mean that I don't want to stand for things. The invitation is, am I standing for or am I standing against? And the impulse to create the other and the impulse to believe that I'm right, that's part of human nature. But what I want to ask us is, are we ready to move beyond this idea that we're animals or that we're just our minds? Because, I think Deepak Chopra said, it's been said that violence is innate in the human experience. And this is a paraphrase. He says something like, that might be true, but so is peace. Peace is also innate within each and every one of us. I don't believe that babies come into this world with a natural tendency toward violence. I might be wrong. There are plenty of people who believe that we come in with the fundamental idea of violence, and that's innate within us. What I want to ask, and perhaps this is what I want to ask in closing, and maybe we'll have time to have some conversation after this. What I want to ask, and this is obviously something that many people have said, which part of me do I want to feed and water, right? Because when I think about what David was talking about this time of year and the harvest, we've spent time planting the seeds of consciousness. So maybe we've been programmed to have seeds of violence. Maybe we weren't even aware of it. Maybe we're not even aware when we say something like, my mother is battling with breast cancer, that we're in an act of violence. That's an act of violence. Because are we at battle with that? And is there a different way of seeing it? There's nothing wrong with the idea. You see all the hashtags, #FCancer, right? I mean, I understand. I have compassion for the part of me who wants to react and fight against. But it just creates more of the cycle of violence. And so if it's true we want peace, that's a fundamental question that I'm inviting you to sit with. Is it true that I want peace in my life? Is it true that I want peace on planet Earth? Is it possible that peace is who and what I am? Maybe my personality has been programmed to believe that I have to be afraid and therefore protect myself or fight or struggle. And perhaps there's a place within me that is beyond all of that, beyond my opinions, beyond my ideas of how I see someone as different based on my age or my race or my sexual orientation or my gender, my political affiliation. What gets created when I make the decision that what I'm going to feed and water is peace? What I'm going to feed and water is love. It's already who I am. In this time of harvest, the seeds have been planted. They've been planted in our consciousness, and there's all these different things that could grow at any moment, and it can happen instantaneously. I react. I notice that reaction. I pause. Oh, yeah, I know who I am. Love is who I am. That's the seed I'm watering. That's what's growing in my life. And when it's growing in my life, it grows in the world. The last thing I want to say is I spent many years of my life trying to change the world. And I realized that it really was a healing within myself. And a healing isn't even exactly the right word, because there's a place within me that's unharmed and unharmable that doesn't even need healing. Already whole and complete, already enough, already the effervescent expression of love in this very room. There is enough love for all the world. That's what I'm choosing to feed and water. And that's the definition of true community. We're going to come together and we're going to help each other plant those seeds, water those seeds, and watch the growth that happens. And then the greatest paradox is all the time that I wanted to change the world so that I could be happy, when I reversed it, I realized once I healed, once I connected with my true nature, suddenly the world seemed to heal. Even in the midst of conflict, I can see the love. Even in the midst of seeming division, I can understand there's a greater reality.